Hello, my name is Amelie Missig, and I am the industry insider for the data engineering, business, and technology sectors. Today, we're going to be talking about interviewing. So, first of all, hi, I'm Amelie. I'm currently a senior studying business at Marshall with a minor in applied analytics at Viterbi. I interned at PwC last summer as a tech consultant, originally from LA. I'm also from the Netherlands, and I'm a soccer player, chef, yogi, adventurer in my free time. And right now, I have a full-time offer for PwC for tech consulting in 2026. So here we are on the Industry Insider Sessions timeline, and today we're going to be talking about interviewing, our last and most fun topic, in my opinion. So first of all, let's start off with the high-level facts about interviews. They already think that you're a good fit for the company. If you got an interview, you already passed through the resume stage, maybe the hire review stage. So just know that you've accomplished something and they think you're good. You don't have to pretend that you're not good. At this point, you're good. So now they're just trying to see if they're going to like you and if they actually want to work with you. And it's actually really important if they like you as a person outside of your capabilities. Also, interviews are the best place to stand out from everybody else. A resume are just words on a page, but you as a person, you're super special. The usual format is around 30 to 45 minutes over Zoom nowadays. I personally haven't had any in-person interviews before. Many times, especially for consulting or casing type interviews for STEM related fields, they're back to back with 2 to 3 interviews in a row, and sometimes this can be referred to as a super day. There's also oftentimes more than one round, maybe 2 to 3 rounds of interviews, where they get progressively more challenging as it goes on. And also, they're usually scheduled by you. So you'll probably get an email about, hey, you got the interview, pick from these time slots, and you get to decide what time it is. So obviously, know yourself. If you think you would be more alert and better at an interview in the morning versus the afternoon, just keep that in mind and also like think about that because it's completely up to you. They're not going to judge you if you have an 8 a.m. call. They're not going to think you're better because your interview's at 8 a.m. They're just going to judge you like everybody else. So just pick a time that works for you and won't stress you out. So now let's go through the rules of an interview because it's actually really important. Starting off with the interviewer, the scary guy over there. So the interview is probably an employee at the firm who actually cares about new hires. Interviews are usually done by people who elect to do them. So these aren't people that are being forced. They actually like doing this. So hopefully they're actually nice people. They also only know what the company tells them. So they might have never even seen your resume before. Sometimes they go into it completely blind. And oftentimes they're just looking for someone who's going to check the boxes given to them. And this is especially in the first round interviews. Once you get to the last round interviews where they're with partners or very senior people, those people do their own thing. But when it comes to usual first round interviews, they're checking boxes. So they're going to ask very standard questions usually, and they're looking for certain traits the company knows and that knows that they want. Also, kind of like I mentioned, they don't necessarily know anything about you. They might have been given the resume beforehand, but they probably haven't seen your application overall. They might know what school you go to, maybe not. And so you need to make sure that you're keeping this in mind so that you say all of this and don't feel afraid to say even the basics about who you are. If they ask you about yourself, make sure you include your major, your minor, your school year, your school itself. These things they might not actually know. They also have a specific set of questions they must ask. So sometimes it feels kind of like they're reading off a script, and oftentimes they are. But this is a good thing because you have the chance to be compared to the exact same questions as your peers. So you know that the person who's interviewing for the same role is getting the exact same question. So you guys can be compared fairly on how you guys answer the same exact question. Also, the review on your behavioral performance can be pretty subjective. So, especially on questions like tell me about yourself or tell me about a time that you failed, they can often have some like individual bias if they like you as a person. So, just keep this in mind because it's super important in a behavioral interview to make sure that you're likable. In a case interview, it's a little less important just because at the end of the day, it's whether or not you can solve it and are good at problem solving or coding or whatever the case is. But for a behavioral interview, it's even more important to make sure that you're someone they would really want to work with. And if they like you, that's like a huge benefit. They're also oftentimes looking for specific answers or results. So if they're asking you about a time that you failed, yeah, they don't know the exact story that you're going to tell, but they're looking for specific traits, like you're resilient or you were a leader in a team. Obviously, these traits are kind of standard across the board, but they vary by company and what the company values are. So make sure that you know about the company and what they care about and what they might value. You can find this in the job description on the company website, just so that you tailor your responses to that specific company and what the interviewer might be looking for. So now, you as the interviewee. So you got the interview for a reason. Prove them right. Prove them right about why you were supposed to get that interview. Don't prove them wrong and completely fail. And obviously that's easier said than done, but know that you got the interview for a reason. So this is your chance to prove them right. You have the high ground. So the person interviewing you, especially if they don't know anything about you, they know something about you is good, right? It's like if you were to walk into an Ivy League school and you see someone, you know that they're probably impressive in some way, right? And you're just trying to figure out why. Same thing the interviewer is doing. So make sure you are that impressive person. Like, don't be afraid to be confident and to say everything you've done with confidence and know that you should be proud of yourself because this person is looking for a reason to be impressed because you got this interview. Also present your best self. Make sure your clothes are nice. They don't necessarily have to be business formal unless, the interview asks for specific attire. And also the background, like make sure you blur it regardless of where you are, even if you're in front of a white wall. Strange things happen sometimes. So just be very cognizant about like who you're presenting to them. Also be prepared. I mentioned this a little bit, but like know the role, know the company. Make sure that you can integrate this into an interview. If you can prove to them that you know about the company, that's huge because they're going to know that you've done your research and that you actually care about this. Also, if they give you the name of the interviewer before the interview, which about half and half, sometimes they do, stalk them. Like look them up on LinkedIn, try to find out about them, see if you guys have maybe any shared interests or they went to a school that your brother went to or something like that. Like it's always good to have a little bit of background so you know what you're getting yourself into, if possible. So now what to expect about the interviews themselves. So first, starting off with behavioral, usually these are the first round interviews. And usually the interviewer themselves is a first or second year at the company, or sometimes a recruiter. They've recently graduated, especially from the school that you go to. So it's a little bit less pressure and they're more similar to your age range. So it can feel almost like a conversation at times. Again, like kind of like I mentioned before, they're looking for very specific soft skills and attributes. And these can actually be found in the job description. If you look through the job description, put it in ChatGPT, ask it what it would think the soft skills are, it's very easy to find them through that. And so oftentimes these can be leadership, they can be working with diverse teams, things like that. And make sure that you're very much emphasizing the fact that you're good at working with people, regardless of the job or the role or anything. Like they always like people who are good at working in teams. They're also looking for how you work, how you tackle challenges, how you work with a team, how you fit in the company culture. It's all about the how because they know you might be able to. You can prove that with your resume and all the experiences you share. But how you do it varies a lot. There are people who work with teams and they do it in a very demanding way and they can be considered a good leader, but maybe the company doesn't like people who are very demanding or very strong and opinionated, right? So you just need to think about how you want to portray yourself. Do you want to portray yourself as someone who tackles challenges aggressively, someone who is more passive and takes time to reflect? All depends on also the company culture. If they're a company that moves really quickly with speed, if they're a smaller company maybe, then maybe it's better if you just take on challenges aggressively full front. But maybe they're a company that is a little bit more slow moving because they're a larger company, then it's important that the way you're talking about the way you're tackling challenges aligns with this. I know this sounds super niche, but this could actually be the make or break difference. Also, behavioral interviews are often used as another screening, just as like on addition to the resume. The ultimate question here can be summed up in the airport test, which is a very popular phenomenon of would you spend 4 hours waiting for a delayed flight in the airport with this person? And if the interviewer after the interview is like, oh, like I could never do that, then they're probably not going to give you a good review, even if you say all the right things. And this is why being likable is like very important. And also having that little bit small talk at the beginning, just being a person they think that they would actually want to spend time with, or at least not want to spend time with. These are the typical questions at behavioral interviews. Tell me about yourself, always. For this, 1 minute around an elevator pitch, hit all the facts. So give them school, your major, minor. Quick overview of your most recent work experiences. Don't start from 5 years ago. Start with maybe last two experiences. And then also don't forget to include general interests and facts about yourself because oftentimes this sparks a conversation. So from your interest section or just a few of your hobbies, for example. Tell me about a time you failed, how you overcame it. Tell me about your strengths and your weaknesses. Tell me about a time when you led a team. Tell us about a project you worked on. And just I'll pause here. With all of these, like it's important to obviously get through the experience, but it's also important to walk them through it in a way that makes sense and make sure that the outcome is very emphasized because honestly, they don't really care about the situation. They care about the outcome of what you did when you led the team, when you failed, when you worked on a project, etc. How do you manage your time? This is super interesting because I've gotten this question more than once, and it's at companies that have been very fast-paced. And so clearly some companies care about this more than others because it's more relevant. But for this, like, be super honest. You can tell them that you get stressed out and you have certain strategies. That's better than completely lying and saying, oh, like, I can work with anything. Like, I'm always handling all the work. Like, make sure that you're being also realistic on who you are. Always questions for us. Make sure you have those questions. If you don't have them, that's like a horrible look and can be an automatic no. Also, make sure the questions you're asking are very specific to either the company, the role, or the interviewer. Maybe it's about their position. Maybe it's about a shift in the company recently. Maybe it's about the team that this role that you're applying to works with. Anything specific is great. So here's the STAR method for answering questions like this that I kind of touched on already. So, starting off with a situation, briefly set the scene. So, the team that you're on, the role you're in, or the company you work for during the time. Let's say the question is, tell me about a time you failed. This can be like, I was working on a project with my class and our task was blank. Then the task itself, elaborate on what you were actually doing and what your role was in it. So, who asked you to do this? So, our project for our class, for example, and what amount of time was needed for this? What skills or tools were needed? So, let's say, for example, you could say, um, our task was to create a report on the last 10 years worth of data for XYZ over the course of the semester in Excel. Something super simple, literally a sentence is perfect. Then the action, super important part. How did you actually tackle the task? So, like specific moves you made, specific tools you used, people you worked with, any of the obstacles. So, in the time you failed thing question, it could be something like, um, and then towards the end of the semester, we realized that we had completely screwed up I don't know, way that we were analyzing the data. And this was because in Excel, we had a filter wrong. And so I brought the team together and we had to tackle this before the project was due in less than 48 hours or something. Like this is kind of what is happening, or what is relevant about the certain task and situation that you're talking about. Then, most important part, the results. Spend the most time at the result. Like these three before it, setting the scene, 3 sentences, easy. Result, this is what they care about. Specific and tangible, numeric if possible. How it impacted the company or the team that you're working for. What was the reaction from this result? So in the situation I was describing, you can say, and so I assigned each of my team members a certain task to do within these next 2 days, and we worked tirelessly. We ended up fixing the problem, and our teacher commended us for the work that we had done at the end of the project and received a really amazing grade. And ultimately, I learned XYZ. Like I learned is great if the question being asked is kind of a negative thing that you're talking about. But just make sure like the whole point of this is like to have kind of a systems you go through in your head, especially if you get a question that you've never heard before, that you can be like very systematically breaking it down so that you're making sure you're hitting all the points that the interviewer is going to care about. Okay, on to second round case/technical interviews, whatever you want to call them. So usually these are mid to senior level interviewers. It's a little bit more high pressure. Usually they're older. They can go off script and ask random questions you've never heard before, and are a little bit more intense. So that's just something to be aware of. And there's always, not always, but not always, a single right answer. So they're caring more about the way you're thinking, your methodology. They don't really care if you get the market sizing right. They don't really care if it's a coding based technical type of interview, then it matters more. If the program crashes, then like that's kind of a make or break. But in a case like a more business setting, there's not really a single right answer. It's more about how you're thinking about it. If it involves software, make sure you are very transparent in what you know because they're going to know very quickly if you're lying. And the worst thing you can do is lie. So just make sure that they know how good you are at using whatever you're using. And also like something to note, like these people are pretty senior, so they're experts in this. They're experts in the topics you're talking about or the softwares you're using. So they will know if you don't know. If you start rambling on about a certain language that they're asking you about, and it's very clear to them immediately that you don't know what you're talking about, automatic no. Versus if you were to say, I actually just got an introduction to this language in this class and I'm not super familiar with it, but this is what I've done in the past with it, totally fine, and that's not a negative whatsoever. So the questions they're answering here is how you will apply the skills and your knowledge that you've amassed to a real world situation at this company, how you handle the pressure, because this is a very high pressure situation, and also how your brain works, because at the end of the day, the way you problem solve says a lot about how your brain works. So, their ultimate test is would you be able to handle the work the company does? The case or the technical interview is probably going to be within the scheme of what the typical work that the company does, or at least the type of thinking that the company does every single day. And so, if you can't do it in a high pressure situation like an interview, you most likely will not succeed when on the job. So, there's a reason that these interviews are the way they are. So, this is how you prep for a case. If they require you to know or be proficient in a certain software, make sure you are. And let's say you already know you are, make sure you go over them because sometimes you forget or it's been a while since you've used something and then you mess up on the very simplest of things. It's great if you know that you need to know a certain software just before in advance, just to get your stress out of the way. Go over it a little bit. Maybe watch a YouTube video too on the basics just to you know, refresh your memory. Also no general use cases. This could be interesting because they might not even ask you to use the software itself, but if it's really important that you're fluent in a language, they might ask you certain questions about when to use what. And so it's important to know also how this applies. In general, practicing through online videos was the most helpful for me. So you can look up specific case interviews at the firm specifically that you're interviewing for, or anything in any industry, and it's super helpful that way too. Also, when you're walking through, for example, a YouTube video, use a pencil and paper. It is very easy to just watch a video and be like, oh yeah, that sounds good. But if you don't actually walk through the case ever, then you can get caught in that kind of idea that you do know what you're doing, and then you get to the interview, you've never actually done it before and written the, data down, and then it feels like it's the first time you've done it. So make sure you're actually practicing with a pen and paper like you would during an interview. Also visualize the problem. If they're going to give you a data set or a problem in general and they give you that ultimate question, visualize it. See, okay, look at the bigger picture. How is this going to affect the company? How can I break this down into smaller parts? Like I just said, break it down into the buckets of information, whether this be the buckets of information they provided you that will be relevant to you in the future, or break it down into your recommendations. Obviously, case frameworks are super relevant in the business industry, and I'm sure they are for anything else as well. But this also applies to the information that they give you so that you can kind of compartmentalize, okay, what's important now and what data that I'm going to use in step two, for example. Also, make sure that you have a systematic approach and you make sure you share this. The worst thing you can do is have a great approach and then not let the interviewer know, and then they kind of have to figure it out themselves. If you're going to say, okay, I'm going to look at this from the bigger picture and then work down to the smaller elements, say this. If you're going to tackle a market sizing question by looking at the individual consumer and then working up to the US population, say this. Like the interviewer wants to hear that because then they can also coach you along the way to make sure you're on the right path. There's also oftentimes case interview prep on the company's website themselves, especially if they're a bigger firm. So make sure you're always watching these just in case they point out anything very specific about their firm. And then also study your industry. If you know the general dynamics of the industry, it will probably show. If you're in a very niche industry, especially, this can be helpful because they might randomly ask you a question or even have a case in a very specific sector. And if you actually have some background in that already, it could be really helpful for you to be able to think about how the problem might be solved because you kind of have a little bit more context on what's going on. If they give you a random industry that you don't know, that's totally fine to tell them that you don't know anything about the industry and you're just going to use common sense. But if it's a question about the industry that the company is in, you can't say that. You better know kind of context about the company. For example, let's say the company is defense consulting. You better know about defense companies and how they work and the main companies involved in it, because if you don't, then it's very clear that you haven't done your research. So, at the end of the day, with an interview, you want to be memorable and you also want to show your value. You want this interviewer to interview people all day. And at the end of the day, remember you specifically and be like, you know what? That girl, that guy, they were someone that I would want to work with, number one. And number two, that is a person that we need to have this company because they would be valuable to us. So if you can do that, then you've succeeded. And I know it's daunting, but if you just go through these steps individually, you can break it down and it'll be less daunting and you can totally do it. Okay, so now let's talk about the offers that you get after you've succeeded and got that interview down. So, types. First of all, verbal. So this can be a phone call from your interviewer yourself or a recruiter. It could also be very random. They can just call you, or you can get an email being like, "Hey, can we have a quick chat?" Usually that's an offer. 5 to 10 minutes, congratulating you, basic details. Or you can get a written offer. So this is an email, it says congratulations, and it has the offer on it. And usually it's from like the company itself, whether it's a recruiter or just the company. And it will contain a link in your applicant portal with the official offer letter. So then you can look at all the details and everything, and you can sign it in within the applicant portal itself. So, looking at the verbal offers specifically, these are a few things to note. They're usually about 1 to 2 weeks after your final round interview, and sometimes they can happen like even a few days after. So, just be aware of that. And because of this, keep your phone on and answer all those random calls you get because you never know when it might be your interviewer calling you. Because you'll probably not have the number saved. And also, if you miss some calls because you're, in class or something, make sure you're looking at your voicemails to see if any voicemails are like, "Hey, call me back. I'm from blank company." And if you happen to answer the call, don't freak out and accept the offer right there and then. Just be happy, thank them. Even if you 100% know that you're accepting this offer, don't accept it until you've read everything in writing to make sure that you're okay with everything. Just wait until you'll get the offer letter via email afterwards, especially if you just get the call and you can read over all the fine print then. During this call though, you can ask anything about like logistics and things like that. And this is a very safe space to do so. Like they're kind of at your mercy. Like they obviously want you, so you can ask all these questions then. And if you are emailed by a recruiter asking for a 5 to 10 minute chat, this is probably good news. And also just like schedule it for the same day or the next day. Like you don't have to schedule this way out in advance. Like it's going to be quick. They want it to get it done just as much as you do. So just make it sure it's like very soon after they email you. And also set a specific time for the call. This is very nitpicky, but if they give you a range of I'm free today from 2 to 4 p.m. and you say, okay, great, I'm free from 2 to 3 p.m. anytime in their works, it's just another email that you have to go back and forth from. If they give you a block of time, just pick a time and set it, and that's totally great. You don't have to go back and forth to try to be polite. Like if they give you a time, you can pick the time. So now looking at written offers, they usually again come in 1 to 2 weeks after your final round. It can come after a month, like though. So this is just very generalized. It's very dependent on the company itself and the industry for sure. And oftentimes it'll CC the interviewers or the recruiters that you have during the process, and they can like congratulate you during that, which is fun. If it comes directly from a recruiter interview who's saying like congratulations, you got an offer, make sure you respond directly to them and respond like pretty quickly, because obviously they took the time to directly email you about it. Um, if they aren't the ones that send you the email direct or the offer letter directly, let's say, for example, you had the interviewer's email from the last interviewer, you thanked them afterwards, and then the company itself sent you the offer letter, make sure you go back and email your recruiter and or interviewer if you have their emails, just to thank them for your time. They helped you get this offer just like how you earned it. So they would be very appreciative if you emailed them in the process. And then also make sure you're checking your email often so that you can respond and at least say thank you quickly to show your interest. And then from there, you can decide when to accept, if to accept. But it's important that you're on your phone and your email during this time after you've completed a final round interview. And your response in thanking someone does not mean that you're accepting or denying an offer. Like you can totally thank everyone and be super grateful and then deny the offer. This is literally just like a practice of respect. So looking at general tips of the trade for offers, just in general. So always ask the interview at the end of your final round when you can expect the results by. There's no need to like be in the dark and just be waiting and waiting and waiting. Ask them and be like, hey, so, at the very, very end, after you've asked your questions, you can be like, okay, just one last thing. I'm just wondering, just for timeline's sake, when I can be expecting to hear back from you by. Totally simple. No wrong reason to be asking that. Also, email interviewers after the time to thank them. If you have their email, sometimes you don't, and that's totally fine. But if you do have their email, make sure you thank them. And then also, if they give you a time frame of when they should, you should be hearing the results by. So let's say they say, oh, you should be getting an email in about 1 to 2 weeks. If 2 weeks have passed and you haven't heard from them, it's okay to email the recruiter or whoever you've been in contact with and ask them, hey, just wondering, I was told we would get, interview results back in about 2 weeks, and it's been 2 weeks, so just making sure that everything's okay. That's a totally fine. But do this once. Do not follow up more than once on this. Also, make sure you're very cordial. Like they could be kind of annoyed like this. Maybe if there's a delay in the process. It's interviewing is a very intense process for the firm itself. A lot of decisions need to be made that are very important. So just make sure you're being really nice and not being too pushy about this. In general, a good rule of thumb is eagerness is way better than like a frustrating or impatience type of vibe from you. So you can ask them like what you should expect, just mention the amount of time and what you were told, just so that they have an idea. Maybe they totally didn't realize it had been so long for you and that's not normal, but everything's fine. Like you just give them a little bit of context. Also, kind of like I mentioned, but never accept an offer until you've seen everything in writing. Read through every single word of the fine print. This is the one time I've done that in my life, reading through every word on a document because super important. You don't want anything all of a sudden, 2 years down the line after you've been working that job, come up and you're like, ah, I should have read the document. You can also almost always ask for an extension on the acceptance of your offer. Just make sure you do it like kind of immediately after you get it, or at least a week before it expires. And oftentimes you can say, I'm just need a little bit more time to make the most informed decision, is sometimes a way that I would word it. And this is usually fine. And usually they'll grant it. If not, don't worry. It doesn't mean anything. It's just sometimes they have like harsher deadlines of when they can get their starting class ready to go or not. And also, even if you accept an offer, it's not binding. I know it's bad to, and also the discourse about it is like it's horrible to renege, but if you do get a better offer later on, it's okay to rescind the initial offer and accept the new one. I know sometimes it can be a bad look, but also at the end of the day, this is your career. You do what's most important for you. So if you get a better offer, then that's fine. Accept that one. That's okay. Okay, so this is what to look for in an offer letter itself. For starting with the organization themselves, um, their reputation, their mission, their culture, their involvement, their professional development opportunities. These are all things that oftentimes can be reflected in the benefits and just the way that they talk about you as an employee in the offer letter. So questions that you can ask yourself for the organization when you look at your letter is, can I grow here? Does it clearly show a trajectory of maybe my pay increases every year or something like that? Or maybe the 401k benefits get better after 3 years at the firm, something like that. Do I actually like what the company does? This is kind of a question you should be asking yourself throughout the whole process. You should know the answer to this. And also, do I agree with the company stands for? Maybe they don't offer any maternity benefits, and you're like, that's not a company I would want to work for because what if I work for them for 10 years and I'm having a kid? Just make sure that you're thinking about everything. You might think you're working for this company for a year, but you never know. So just make sure that you really like everything the organization stands for. Now about the position itself that you got the offer for. So make sure you are very clear about the team that you're placed on, the amount of hours required. Sometimes it shows, the standard hours. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it shows if there's overtime or like extra pay that you could be eligible for or not. Just make note of this. If there's training provided, sometimes it will mention that as well. Travel or relocation, super important. Oftentimes you'll get relocation benefits. If you don't, that's something you can negotiate for. Travel requirements, if they're 100% certain, will also be listed, and this is something that you make sure you're comfortable with. Hybrid or remote policies, very important because this is obviously something that's really relevant today. And obviously, your benefits and pay is like the main thing. So, questions ask yourself about the position. Do I like the team, like the actual role that I'm assigned to? And if I don't, like, can I switch teams? Is that possible? Also, does this align with my skills and interests? This is something you should also be asking yourself during the whole time. And then at the end of the day, the main question is, am I willing to do the work for the pay? So if the pay is not enough for you, that's a very valid reason not to accept a job. And I know that's scary and it sounds maybe a little bit surface level, but we're all living in the same economy. So if the job doesn't cut it with the pay, that's okay. You can reject it. So, common deal breakers when it comes to offers that just to keep in mind and be aware of. Location is too far away from where you're currently residing, and they don't have a relocation bonus. Relocation bonuses would help a lot. So if you can't move or it would take way too much money and time to move, very valid to not accept a role. Pay is too low. Already talked about this. No overtime and over 40 hours a week expected. This is very common for internships. If you get an internship and it says that you're expected to work 40 hours a week, but the internship is at an investment bank and it also says no overtime expected or paid, you can be very certain that you're going to be working way more than 40 hours a week and not getting paid for them. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're willing to do that. Team up isn't of interest. Sometimes you're placed on a really random team, and maybe that's just like going to make your life super boring and it's just not worth it for you. And also at the end of the day, like you can go through all these interviews and be like, you know what, I actually really didn't like my interviewers, or like I'm actually getting a really bad vibe from the company. And that's fine. Like they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So at the end of the day, like you could already know after your interviews that this is not the right fit for you. So when you get your offer, main thing to know, you are in the driver's seat. It is your time to shine, to make life decisions, and it's okay whatever decision you make, you're making the right one for you. Thank you. That's all we have today. If you have any questions, you can look me up on LinkedIn and message me there. Thanks.